What's up YouTube, and welcome to your next Geek Trip. Today, I'll be making the new Batarang from the Batman vs Superman movie. The Batarang itself is going to be weathered. It's been in a place for quite some time, or Batman has used it a bunch. That's, of course, if he recycles his Batarangs, which I'm assuming he doesn't pick them up after every battle, but yeah, let's get started. So what things are you going to need for this project? For starters, you'll need a 3D printer with filament. Pretty much anything with the right volume will work. You could use a resin printer, the powder SLS, the SLS printers. It's really up to you. Next up is black and silver leaf rub and buff. I'll talk a little bit about that later. Lastly, get some metallic silver paint. I chose aluminum airbrush paint because I had it lying around. And then black paint, as well as a few paintbrushes and a low grit sandpaper like a 40 grit and a much higher one in the 200s range. And that's really all. Alright, so let's get started. Since this is simply going to be a prop, I don't need it to be really strong and an aluminum or steel or anything like that, so I just 3D printed it. I have a link to the model in the description. After the printer finished, I began the painful process of sanding. I do plan on getting a media blaster eventually, but I really don't have much room in my tiny apartment. After a good 20 minutes of sanding with a very low grit sandpaper, I finished it off with a much higher grit. The biggest key is to get all the lines from the layering of the blades flattened out. Next up, it's time to make some battle wounds. One thing that works great for this is a simple soldering iron with a fine tip. You can make as many or as few cuts as you would like, but try to make them straight, as any kind of natural occurring cut or gouge would typically be pretty straight. I did a couple towards the center, but also out on the edges flowing off the side. The one downside of soldering is that unlike cutting, the iron merely melts and moves the plastic out of the way. This leaves unrealistic globs of plastic at the top edges of the cut. To get rid of this, it's time to pull out the handy dandy sandpaper again. Sand down those edges until they're even with the rest of the Batarang. Make sure to use a high grit paper to finish everything off. Now it's time for the painting. To start out, I put a couple coats of thin primer made for models to keep the fine details. The next part is where the magic happens. Of course, we know this is plastic, but Batman's Batarang is most certainly not. So how do we give it that metallic sheen? Well, not so much a sheen, seeing as how it's weathered, but you get the point. This magical feat isn't even really accomplished with paints, but a wax. It's called rub and buff, and it can be found in most hobby shops. I know it's expensive, but don't worry about the price too much, as it can last for quite a while. First, I applied the black to the entire prop. Keep in mind that as the name implies, you want to buff the paint with a cloth. Some people use their hands, but I find an old t-shirt that I cut up can do extremely well. After about an hour of drying time, I moved to using painter's tape for lining up where my silver would be applied. I started by taping off the left and right sides and applied and buffed the silver leaf to those edges. Next, I taped off the bottom in the same way and simply applied the silver leaf again. Next, it's time to make those cuts you did with the soldering iron come to life. Dab a little aluminum paint on your work area and use a paintbrush to apply it to the inside of the cuts. Keep in mind that the Batarang is a metal with black paint on it. So anytime there's a cut, or for example where it was sharpened, the metal shines through. After the paint is applied, quickly wipe the top portion away with your t-shirt cloth. This should leave the metal paint inside the cut to give it the damaged look. It can be difficult to completely wipe away the paint as the wax likes to hold it there, but we will be applying some more black rub and buff later. Now, it's time to give the Batarang some more damage. Take either a nail file or really low grit sandpaper and scrape a few areas to wear it down a little. I then took the black paint and applied it to the sides with the silver and wiped it away so it would seem the scratches got dirt caught in them. While at the same time, I took some more aluminum paint to the black areas with scratches and applied while quickly wiping it away so it shows that it scratched through the paint. I really played around with this, as well as scraping it and denting it in a few places. Everyone's Batarang is going to be different, and that's just like real life. When it gets damaged, it's not going to happen in the same place every time. Well, that just about does it. It's a pretty quick and simple process and can turn out amazing. Well, I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, please subscribe or give me a thumbs up. It really helps me out, and it helps encourage me to do more videos for you guys. I really hope you enjoy it. Have a great day.